Hello, tracking fans. My name is Nancy, and I am the program manager for Great Barrington Kennel Club. And well-respected, well-liked, and well-known AKC tracking judge, Ruth Vaughan, has agreed to talk to us about her all-time favorite sport. So I am going to pin her and turn it over to her. And if you have questions, you can ask them either in person or add them in the chat. All right, so Ruth, it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the invitation to come and talk to you a little bit about tracking. I know we've got a couple people here who are trackers, so that's a wonderful place to start. I don't know whether anyone would have questions right off the bat about the sport of tracking. It's a little different, obviously, than the kind of scent work that many of us are doing, and the kind of scent work that Nancy is currently judging. But it's all based on the same principles on how we're training our dogs to recognize and identify and follow scent. So that connects the two sports entirely. When I start a new tracking dog, the first thing that I do, not unlike when we're teaching a dog to recognize one of the target odors that we need to teach them to seek in scent work training, is I create an association for that dog between the possibility of rewards and human scent. And the thing about tracking is it's not any one particular human, it's whoever has the scent that's left for the dog at the very start of the track. There's an assigned scent, and it could be any person. So they have to learn to recognize myriad scents, all human scents, as opposed to one or two or three or four particular target odors. So that's something that's a little different about tracking than what we call our nose work or scent work training, I was going to say. So one of the first things that we do in either sport is creating an association for our dogs between the likelihood of wonderful rewards and seeking the scent that we ask them to find. So when I start one of my beginning workshops, one of the very first exercises seems like one of the dumbest things that most people have ever seen, but it's the key to the success for the dog to learn about tracking. And that is to start with something that we call a directionless track, which for me, anyway, that's the way I start it. I was going to hold up a little picture of one, but I can describe it, I think, pretty well. You create in the grass, we start in a grassy area, a little circle that someone steps into and walks around, pressing down all of the grass that's there. And that circle is about the same size as the length of the body of the dog that's going to work this scent circle. We press all that grass down, we stomp around, we put our hands down on it, we put all kinds of scent. So there's crushed vegetation, there's disturbed earth, there's human scent. We create a disc in the grass of that scent, and then we sprinkle it liberally with some food treats that the dog would find very desirable. And we step out of that area, and we just allow the dog then on harness or lead and on a longer line to go in and experience being inside this little scent circle. It's classical conditioning, pure and simple. We don't tell the dog any commands. We just let them experience this for themselves. And what I tell everyone is the magic happens not when the dog is necessarily inside the disc and nibbling all the treats up and having a wonderful time. The magic happens when the dog goes outside the circle a little bit and onto grass that has no track scent on it at all, and finds nothing, and turns and brings their little nose back into the scent circle where there is lots of human scent and crushed vegetation and lots of little treats. We keep a high rate of reward for these dogs. So there's a treat every 5 or 6 inches inside this little scent circle. After they've returned in a couple of times from a little tiny venture out and then coming back in, so that they can create the difference, the association between where there is disturbed earth and human scent. That's where I'm finding all my goodies. And outside the circle where there's just grass and no human scent, it's not that great. There's nothing good for me out there. Then we pull them gently out of the circle. Time's up. Come on, buddy. You're out of the circle. And we put them up in their crate or in the car for a little bit and let them think about that. We go back in to the scent circle. We kind of restock it with little goodies. And we do this repeatedly, maybe 2 or 3 times. From that point on, as I say, the ship has sailed. That dog has for stick to the area on the ground where they're finding the track scent, the human scent, the crushed vegetation in this case. That's where their rewards are going to be. So after that exercise is completed, this is just the complete introduction to tracking. And actually, I go back and I do these exercises with my even more advanced dogs on occasion, because it's also about how long will they focus on their sniffing job. Because in the end, really detailed tracking work isn't about running down the track quickly. It's about maintaining that scenting work, the actual sniffing. Some dogs would rather kind of run around a little bit, or maybe run down the track and just sniff occasionally. That dog is likely to miss corners or to lose their track at some point. The dog that develops a skill and endurance for using their nose to find scent continually for many minutes at a time, those are the dogs that'll be able to pass the really hard advanced tests. So we start with this little directionless track. It's just how long can you stick with this, and can you discover where the important part is for you, and that is where there's track scent and human scent. So after the dogs have experienced this scent circle a couple of times, and they're resting, and they get lots of water and they're resting, we start their very first little track. And it'll be the first experience they have with this scent work that they're doing actually has direction. And I start with curving tracks, which you'll never find in a test, by the way. But a curving track that goes into an arc shape is a track that the dog has to follow closely and carefully without ever making an assumption about where it might go next, as in like where the handler is focused straight ahead, or that they could look up and say, oh, I'm just going to go in a straight line this way, the track must go this way. So it makes for a thoughtful and careful tracking dog from the very beginning, which is kind of nice. So I choose to take that scent circle that we just worked, and nearby it create a longer stretched out scent circle that goes in an arc. And it literally will be maybe 12 to 16 inches wide, because we actually get in there, we scuff our feet and we mash down the grass. We're making as mashed a situation here as we did in the scent circle, except now we're making it a long arc. And this first little track might be 20 feet long, 25 feet long, maybe, and an arc that has a nice round shape that you could easily, let's say, park a car inside. So it's not a tiny little arc, it's fairly good sized. And we start and we put little food treats along in that about every 6 inches or so, and then a gap, and then one, and then another gap, and then 2 or 3, so that the dog from the very beginning is not quite sure where they might find the treats, but they will always be in the area where there's disturbed earth, crushed vegetation, and humans.
Do you stagger the distance between those treats just so the dog isn't saying every 6 inches, here's one, here's one, here's one? So
yeah,
one's at 6 inches, one's at 18, one's at a foot.
Yes, exactly. And it's not critical, honestly, at first, but it helps. It kind of keeps them guessing.
Yes.
And there's enough of a possibility that they interpret this as just a food search, that once you, right from the get-go, if you spread them out a little bit, or make a little gap and then have 1 or 2 or 3, so that they don't grab one and think, oh, I'm done, I can run on now, but maybe there's another and another, but then there's a gap, but they're always leading somewhat forward. Then they begin to actually work sniff scent between these groups of treats. So that's kind of nice. They actually begin to follow track scent as well. And hopefully, as this classical conditioning has happened, the association for the track scent also becomes, I'm actually following track scent. Yes, I'm also finding food, but it's not just, I'm not following food scent specifically. If they're every 6 inches, I don't know if they would ever get out of the envelope of food scent that's on the ground there. So yes, I would say I definitely from the very beginning, I'll put a more dense, higher rate of reward right at the beginning of this first couple of tracks. And right away, I begin to spread it out a little bit and always leading them forward a little. And I always make sure, even from the very beginning with these very beginning tracks, no matter if I'm scuffing or stomping or anything else, that I'm always going in the same direction. So if I say to someone, I would lay that track twice, possibly 3 times, that always means you go to the end of it, hop off, walk back to the beginning, and head back down in the same direction. because right now and forever after, the dogs are going to have to realize that tracks have a direction. Because later on in the testing phase, when you get to actually doing some tracking tests, quite early on, they have to come up to a tracking flag, a start area, where there's an article that has their scent assignment on it. And it's on a long line that goes for 30 yards in either direction at least. And they've got to hit that and then decide, well, what direction does it go? And if they go the wrong way, they fail quickly, because that's called backtracking and they're heading in the wrong direction on that track. So I try to get them used to the idea that tracks all direction. And was that a question?
No, I'm just muting some people. Please make sure that
Okay.
you're muted so we don't have any feedback. I do have some questions.
Oh, let's go. Let's do
All right,
questions.
so can tracking be trained alone, or is it better to have a human friend? And that's of great interest to me, which we have discussed, because during COVID, it was me and my dogs. As much as I like my friends, it was me and my dogs. And they are, I mean, my boy dog was a little stuck because it's like, where's her odor? Where is she?
Yeah.
You can follow me to the moon. Other people, not so much.
Yeah. All of your beginning tracks can be laid just by yourself. Tracking really, and I trained almost all of my dogs just on my own scent for quite a while, because I was interested in really learning what they looked like when they were tracking. So I needed to know exactly where the track was. And I found that was best when I actually laid their own tracks. So I was training myself to learn what they looked like while they were working scent or losing scent or searching for scent. And when I laid my own tracks, then I knew right where that was, and then could relax about where's the track and really focus on what's my dog doing. So for those of us that don't have an opportunity to train with a group or to take a class very often, it's not an issue, honestly. All of the training for tracking, in all honesty, comes while you're laying the track. The tracks teach the dog. We just allow the dogs to experience the tracks, and then we're learning at the same time, but the tracks teach the dog, and we as trainers learn to lay good tracks that help train our dogs to track.
Great.
So,
all right. So here's another question about the initial exercise you talked about. To be clear, all the grass inside the circle is smushed down and loaded with treats?
yes, about every 4 to 5 inches or 6 inches, you're making a pizza. You're making a scent pizza, so it's a disc. And what I often do is I'll step, you want to take a big step into that circle. So you're walking out into the field, take a big step into the circle so that there isn't areas right outside the edge of the circle where there's footprints, track scent essentially, that is unrewarded. We wouldn't want their little nose to go out the scent circle and find a footstep that doesn't have any food in it. So this, just for this original exercise, you just want to take a little step so that your scent disc pizza flattened area doesn't have an unrewarded human footstep right next to it. Give it 18, 20 inches or so. Just take a little bit of a step in there. I often will put a couple of flags around, and the first thing I'll do is sort of chug around in a circle and create an edge. You want a real boundary, a real smashed grass, tall grass, like a real boundary along that. And again, you want the circle to not be much bigger in diameter than the length of the body of your dog. So for a little dog, that's going to be a fairly small circle, because where the magic happens is when they leave the circle. And not leave as in going to the next county, but get that little nose out, find out that there's nothing that much interesting outside, and make that comparison. The number of times they make that comparison between non-track, no rewards, and track area and rewards, that's when they're making the classical association we need to make to create them in them the desire to seek track scent and always return to it. And what's really interesting is as soon as you get out of that circle situation on that first arc, you'll see their little noses go outside, which is, it's like a long trench. I mean, again, these beginning tracks are not about, can the dog smell this? No. We're looking for specific kinds of tracking behaviors, which is staying close to the footsteps and staying right in this little track that we're making for them. And from there on, we make it harder and harder as far as the scent work is concerned. But these early tracks are really about creating the kinds of tracking behavior that we as handlers will find easier to read and to create the kind of intensity and accuracy that a tracking dog will need to go all the way to the highest level, possibly finish a tracking championship. So that's the method.
You're in essence beginning the whole process of building value for human odor.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
here's a quick question from Mark Poe. Do you age it at all, maybe 15 minutes, or did you just stomp it out there and then go grab your dog?
Yeah. In these beginnings for these very first few tracks, aging isn't really important. I would say no. Though I will say, if you have a dog highly trained in other scent work, such as nose work, where they have been trained to be very cognizant and sensitive to odors in the air, that might be an issue for this dog because they're in a cloud of air odor as well as ground scent. If you let it age a little bit, particularly on a breezy day, they're going to have much less of that air scent that they may be interested in, and really focus on the ground scent, which in tracking is what we need them to do.
Hey,
so that was a question.
Here's another question that is related to that. Is AKC scenting not conducive to AKC tracking? And I have been asked that numerous times. Oh, I can't teach my dog nose work and tracking at the same time. And I have my opinion about that, but I'm interested to hear yours, Ruth.
No, that's an awesome question. I've asked it myself of my own dogs, and I have many students who do both. And I would say for the vast majority of dogs, there is no issue between doing both sports at the same time. The kinds of things I would say that you might do to be helpful would be perhaps to have slightly different equipment for both sports. The dogs are so sensitive to that. So they might have a different harness for tracking than they use in their nose work. The pre-exercise, pre-training, pre-test routine would be different. How you and when you have a start routine for going to your tracking start flag, as opposed to as you're getting ready, the staging areas and such that you go through before you go in for a nose work or scent work search. They're very different, and the dogs will recognize the difference between those two things. The thing that we'll do with tracking, though, to help them out a little bit is very rarely in tracking is air scenting going to help them, and often it can lead to problems. So in tracking, we do a lot in our training to help our dogs just begin to rely on ground scent. That's why the question about aging was interesting to me, because quite often early on, I actually do start aging my tracks on, particularly in damp weather, where there's just a lot of air scent clouding around. If I'm having trouble with a dog that does a lot of quartering, that will on a straight line track, you'll see them quartering back and forth. They're going to the edges of the scent cone that sways, that is available to the left and to the right, where the actual footsteps are. I would rather see that dog wait, get that air blown out of there, so that all they have left, if you had your smell-o-vision goggles on, the clouds of scent would be gone, and they just have bright little footsteps on the ground. But those are where the scent is. And that's what the dog would then have left to them after we've had a little bit of aging. So the aging often doesn't make tracking more difficult. It makes for more accurate work because the dog's really focused on the ground scent, because they can't be swimming around at all this available air scent after that. That's a really good question. So overall, no, you can train both sports at the same time. I would just try to make some differentiations in routine and in equipment. And then after that, yeah, that would be my idea.
Yeah, those things both give context. And the other thing that gives a huge amount of context is when you're tracking, you're in the middle of a field, or you're at a field.
Yeah.
You don't have odor floating from every orifice of the building. Yeah.
Exactly. Whether you're in a big field, the woods, an urban campus, of course, all that's going to be outside, and you're going to be alone. Right. In AKC tracking, even at the tests, it's one track per customer, and it's you, the two judges, and possibly the track layer, and they stay way back, and you go out alone. So again, it is a sport that is very accessible for the dog that has difficulty being around in groups of dogs or groups of people, because you do work alone. even in your test. The one thing I will say is that if we train always alone, the dog that has some environmental sensitivities or perhaps is a little protective, we do have to get that dog used to the fact that they will be followed on a track and possibly 30 to 50 yards back. They're going to have two judges walking along, and the dog might be constantly looking over their shoulder, like who are those creepy people following us on our track? So those are the kinds of things that we need to train a dog. Eventually, that's where you might need some help, some buddies who are tracking your buddies, or you give them a beer and say, hey, follow me drinking your beer and whatever it is on my track. I'll pay you. I'll give you a beer. Whatever. Just follow me through this field while I run this track, because my dog needs to get used to having other people out here, to the point where if I've gone 150 yards and then make a left-hand turn and then make another, we're coming back and you're still going up that original leg, we're also going to pass each other. So things like that could happen in a test, just so the dog doesn't go, whoa, I can't deal with this. I don't like this at all because there's somebody else out here in my field. So, but most of your training could be done alone. So yeah. Great questions, by the way. These are really good questions.
Let's see what else we have. Okay, so Becky Robinson would like to know, is there a better time of year to practice tracking? Can it be done in winter with snow? So I myself have tracked in the snow, and my
Yes.
dogs love it because they are Akitas.
Yes.
It's their favorite time of year. So Becky, I bet Ruth says yes.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's really fun to track in snow, particularly if you do let your tracks age a little bit, because then you get to see all the weird little cross tracks that you didn't know were out there, like little animals crossing the track, or perhaps other people. If you laid a track in a schoolyard or something, then you see where all the other people may have crossed over, and you can watch your dog sort of investigate those cross tracks, which is really interesting. Snow holds scent really well. It's pure water. Water is the thing that holds scent. So when you have trouble with dogs scenting and tracking, it's often because the track has dried out, desiccation of scent. It makes it very hard for the tracking dogs. And the cooler weather is huge. The worst time to try to track, and I suppose this is with all scent work, is in the heat, because dogs struggle terribly to pant and respirate at the same time that they need to do scent work, which you will see their whole facial embouchure changes. And we all recognize this if we work with scent. That whole mouth comes forward, their mouth closes, and they're drawing in that scent through their nose. That's really hard on a dog to do for long periods in hot weather. So definitely the cooler weather is the time that you want to do your tracking. So winter and snow, it's great. It's a good time to track.
Yeah, that seems to be perfect for me. Let's see. That's right now, that's all the questions we seem to have. So, yeah. Anyone else have a question you need me to ask? Yeah. So, I have a couple of friends who are just starting in tracking, and they have questions like this. How often should I be practicing with my dog, and how long should the tracks be? So for the newbies, what do you recommend?
Okay. Just like so many other things, whatever sports we're training, will the dog stay enthusiastic? Mm-hmm. So if a young puppy, and I start baby puppies, we're talking 9-10 weeks old baby puppies, because even they can look for food. They love it. Short. I want them to be excited, and I don't want them to be struggling. So depending on the health and vitality and interest of the dog, and the quality of your treats, and the temperature and conditions, you can track 2-3 times a week, and they can be short little tracks. Just keep them wanting more. I was just going to think, I just wanted to mention something else. Yes, here in the Northeast, we can use food on the ground throughout most of the year. Once the nasty things like yellow jackets and bees come out that like meat, then you are on all dried or freeze dried or treats that will not attract them. If you're in an area at Florida or the South where you've got fire ants or other things that make it impossible to put anything on the ground at all, then you might end up with some sort of a marker swap. And we can get into articles later on in a few minutes, because that I train completely separately from the actual scent work of tracking. But some people use a tiny little metal washer, and they'll put those down every so often and always trade the dog. So all the dog has to do is like tap their nose on the little marker, and they trade it immediately for a piece of food, but that food isn't sitting there on the ground getting covered with biting insects. So in areas where we cannot use food on the ground at all, there are ways around that. And in the Northeast, we're lucky in that we can do that quite a bit of the year, except for maybe in later August and September when you can't leave food out for the dogs unless it's dry and really unpalatable to things that would sting your dog when they pick up that food, and you don't want them to get a mouthful of bees. So there's an idea on that.
That is an excellent point about those lovely insects.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what are the best places to get a tracking harness and a long line? And that's actually a good question, because I got a recommendation from someone who has a lot of tracking experience in our area, but I would like to pick your brain about that.
Yes. I have a little handout that I give when I'm doing my seminars about where to find things, but it changes all the time. These companies go out of business or they're bought up by other companies. But I'll tell you, some of the nicest harnesses I've seen recently, and I use just a plain little nylon harness. One thing for me is I like the harnesses that, like the Premier SureFit harness. It's completely adjustable, so I don't have to try to get my dog's leg through one of the openings. I could drop it over their neck and then clip it behind their back, underneath here. And it completely I can size it by sliding the adjusters any way I want. So you want an adjustable harness. And I will just diverge for a moment. In American Kennel Club tracking, and I think you'd find this in any venue that offers tracking, the key word here is non-restrictive harness. So it can't be a harness that's meant to control the dog's movement in any way, such as an easy walk harness where the clip would go on the front, on the chest, which affects their balance so they can't pull. A tracking harness has to be something the dog can pull into. And I have my little V-neck sweater on here. Some of the best harnesses come down into a V shape, and the ring that holds the pieces of nylon sits right on the dog's sternum below the soft tissue of the throat. As a tracking judge, I can tell you there's nothing that makes us stop a team faster and excuse them from the track than a harness that rides up as the dog pulls and the owner offers resistance, and that harness slides up and starts to hit the dog right in the throat, and they start to choke and cough and cannot breathe. That's a restrictive harness also. So you want to make sure that whatever harness you use on your dog, that if it has a cross piece across the chest that goes horizontally as opposed to a V thick, just make sure that as the dog pulls forward and you give any resistance, that piece can't come up and get onto the soft tissue of the throat. If it stays across the shoulder muscles, the deepest part of the chest, and on the sternum, and you can feel the sternum on your dog, that chest bone that comes up just before their throat, you're good to go. And so a lot of the harnesses that we're seeing in agility these days, the Canine Julius, and others are perfectly fine for tracking. The last judges seminar that I went to, we spent quite a bit of time looking at all these interesting harnesses, because judges are being blindsided by all these new harnesses and they're not quite sure, is this a legal harness or not for tracking? And it came down to, does it restrict the dog's motion? Does it affect their breathing or their windpipe? And can it control the direction that the dog is going by the way the handler's handling the line? If either of those three things are true, then that harness is not legal for tracking. And that's really the only things. That said, Nordkin, Ordkyn, makes a wonderful little harness.
And they're not that expensive.
No, they're wonderful.
Yeah.
They're nylon, and they have these great little soft pads at that point on the chest.
Yep.
And right on the back plate where you attach they're wonderful. And I've heard stories about people who said they'd had a Nordkin harness for some time, and then something went wrong or they lost a piece. They write to the company and bam, they either replace the harness or they send them the piece that they need. They repair harnesses. They're a wonderful small company here in the US. So Nordkin, Ordkyn, is a wonderful company for harnesses, and they have a whole little section specifically on padded tracking harnesses, and I would recommend them quite a bit. All different sizes, lots of colors, and if they get icky, you just throw them in the washing machine.
They also have, because I was looking at their website just the other day, they also have a fully padded harness now. The ones that I way back when, they just had padding at the pressure points, and now they have a fully a fully padded harness, and it's
Awesome.
only $10 more expensive.
Yeah, yeah,
So, been
very nice.
happy with it.
Yeah. Now that said too, the range of harnesses available is vast, and depending on your dog and how you feel about your equipment. Some people love a leather harness that might even have like the sheep's wool, the big padded chest on. You might see them on Rottie's, Dobermans, and some of the people that also do some of the Schutzener IPO training. And they're beautiful. They're very expensive. They often have to be custom fit to your dog. But some people just love the leather, and there is nothing wrong with that. So you can always look into a leather harness for your dog. You have to really care for that leather and make sure it's going to be out in the weather. It's going to get wet. It's going to get muddy. So care for that. Some people love biothane, the material it's like a very soft rubbery plastic that almost imitates leather, but it doesn't absorb water. It doesn't get burrs stuck to it, anything like that. So biothane harnesses, biothane tracking lines, leather tracking lines. So I'm going to slide into tracking lines here just for a minute. I use very simple equipment, and I've put 3 championships on my dogs, and I just like really simple equipment. So I use a nylon harness from Premier, or one like the Nordkin. The tracking lines I use are just the flat woven cotton leashes that you could get at Petco. 30, you want about a 30-foot line.
This one is foot grade.
Yep, 30 to 40. There are, and those lines, they will get heavy if they get wet, but they don't get slippery. If you put them away wet, they may stink after that. So you have to put them in the wash. Cotton gets icky. So every kind of line has its pluses and minuses. The leather lines feel great in your hands. They may stretch. You have to care for them a little differently. Some people love the biothane lines. Some people, rather than a flat line that's ribbon shaped, that might be 5/8 of an inch wide, like a round line, like parachute cord or rope. I mean, like laundry line, literally, or a climbing rope. It's pretty colors. You can use anything like that. The lighter weight the dog, the lighter weight and lighter you want the line. You don't want a big old heavy line getting full of water or snow and weight down your poor little dachshund to the point where they can't pull this heavy 30-foot line with them. So you're just sort of sensitive to the hardware. The hardware isn't oversized for your dog or undersized. That would be on your lead. And then the material of the lead is what feels good in your hand. How much pull are you going to have from that dog that's hurting your hand? A little tiny round line will cut your hands if you've got a strong dog. So a wider, flatter line that rides over your hand like a horse's reins on a bridle, something like that will just save your hands, outside of having gloves as well. So again, it's sort of by the dog and by preference. But I will say that as a requirement in American Kennel Club tracking, you will be following your dog at a minimum of 20 feet behind the dog while the dog is working. So that's a requirement. Your dog has to be 20 feet out in front of you while you're tracking. So you don't want to be at the end of your line at 20 feet. You're going to want to have some extra line in case you trip or fall, and maybe the dog gets a little bit more ahead of you. You're going to want another 10 feet of line that you can hold on to, have dragging out behind you, and have, if maybe you trip and accidentally draft the line, you've got 10 feet that you can work with there. So I do recommend 30 feet. Most of us do own a 40-foot line, but man, that's a lot of line to drag around in the woods. You're going to get that tangled between things. So 30 feet seems to be the magic number on what you need for a real tracking line for doing AKC tests. So there's the little information on that.
Yeah, that was very useful. Let's see if we have anything else. Oh, here's a good question. Are there differences in success based on breed of dog?
I don't have a lot of data on that. Traditionally, there have been dogs that have been used for tracking by various organizations. So your German Shepherds, of course, the bloodhounds, and the hounds have been used for searching. Honestly, every breed of dog can track and can be successful. The longer, harder, like the TDX tracks, if you have a little dog, they have to be very physically fit to make it through a track like that, because it can be some pretty tough going in some of those tracks. So sometimes the not even restriction, but the difficulty for a breed of dog may be more related to their physical fitness and their size in the kind of just terrain they're going to have to be on, as opposed to their ability to do the scent work itself. On that note, I will say that some of the braciocephalic dogs with this very short little noses, like the pugs, the Frenchies, there is some thought that because of the shortness of their actual structure, that there's not as much scenting capability in those dogs. But I can tell you, I don't believe that there's any one breed in the US right now that hasn't at least passed a tracking, a TD level test. Even in little Chihuahuas can pass these tests, but they might have a hard time with the TDX. But no, so every kind of dog has enough capabilities probably to pass either a tracking dog TD test or perhaps the tracking dog urban test, which might be in a park or a small, like a school campus, as opposed to a big, tall, heavy grass field of some kind.
Actually, could you talk a little bit about that? Because many of the people that are on are more experienced trackers, and there are also some newbies who know very little about the sport. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between the urban tracking?
Yes.
Or plain old TD?
Yes, you bet. In fact, I've got my little TD TDU comparison chart right here. For many years in American Kennel Club, there were only two tracking tests available: the TD, which was the tracking dog test, and the TDX, the tracking dog excellent test. And they have added in recently two more urban tests: the beginning level one, which is TDU, tracking dog urban, and the one that's really probably the toughest test to pass is the variable surface tracking test, which is sort of like a TDX in an urban environment. So let me tell you a little bit about the American Kennel Club requirements for these different test tracks. The tracking dog test, TD, so you'll see it referred to as a TD test, is between 440 yards and 500 yards long. The 440, it's a quarter mile. Do you remember running that in gym class? 400, yes, I do remember. So it's 440 to 500 yards long and can have anywhere between 3 and 5 turns in it. The age at which you're going to run that track is half an hour to 2 hours. So you'll be practicing anywhere in that age range for the age on the track. It needs to be on pretty much one consistent type of ground cover, and that has to be vegetation. So it's going to probably take place in a hay field, it can be in a cut bean field, I suppose. It would maybe be on alfalfa, but it needs to be fairly consistent. They don't expect that you're going to have to cross any big roads. You're not going to have to negotiate ditches, moving water, cliffs. There shouldn't be obstacles there. It should be strictly a test of your dog's ability to follow a scent trail through a consistent kind of vegetation covering. And it is an untimed event. As long as your dog is working, those judges are going to let you work. If the dog completely quits working, or there's a violation, or the dog leaves the track and goes off to someplace else, that's when your test will end. You will fail at that point, but then usually you're allowed to go ahead and try to finish that with the help of your track layer. I'll go over the different tests, and then I'll go into the details of the actual structures of the tests. The TDU is very much the same as the TD. It can be 400 to 500 yards as opposed to 440 to 500, very close, same age range. But interestingly, same number of turns, 3 to 5. The big differences here are that this tracking dog urban test will go over some non-vegetated surface. And let me tell you, it's 10 to 30%. So if that's a 400-yard track, 30% is over 100 yards. So there could be long spans of area where your dog is going to be crossing non-vegetated areas all in a straight line. There can be no turns for you to have to negotiate on those non-vegetated surfaces. But you might have to cross a road several times. You might have to cross a long parking lot. But 10% is fairly small. That might be only 40 yards total. You might cross a wide, maybe a road twice, 20 yards in each direction. The other thing is you will have 3 articles. I didn't mention any articles yet. On the TD, there's 1 article at the start that gives you the scent assignment for your dog. one article at the end that marks the end of the track. And generally, there's a cloth article at the beginning and a leather article, like a nice big work glove at the end that tells the dog that this is what I found. I found my article, I'm finished with the track. On the tracking dog urban test, there are 3 articles. There is a mid-track article that will be either cloth or leather that your dog must find and indicate. So the TD 2 articles only, 440 to 500 yards, 3 to 5 turns, half an hour to 2 hours. The difference with the TD is there's another article, there's an on-track article, and your track will definitely be 10 to 30% non-vegetated surface. And that could be gravel, mulch, asphalt, concrete, brick pavers, anything like that. So those are your 2, what you call the beginning level tests that require certification, which I'll talk about certification in a minute. Once you have either of those 2 titles, you can move on to the other more advanced tests. And that title is what gives you the right or the ability to go ahead and enter the more advanced tests. That's your prerequisite. And the TDX, that's a big test. The TDXs are 800 to 1,000 yards long. They jump to ages a minimum of 3 hours to 5 hours. There have to be 2 scenting obstacles on that track, which could be any number of terrible things. Ditches, crossing water, crossing roads, major changes in cover. So maybe going into the woods out of a hayfield, or from an area where you had hay growing to an area next door where they've just plowed under a cornfield and you're on bare earth with corn stalks. So you're gonna have scent changes like that. And these tracks have 5 to 7 turns. And like I said, they can be up to 1,000 yards long. So that's over half a mile. So the TDX tracks go over all kinds of crazy terrain, and they're very challenging. And you've got the extra age involved. The VST track, which is the other urban track, those are 600 to 800 yards. So not as long, same age. Oh, I didn't mention, on both of these tracks, the VST and the TDX, I forgot, there are 4 articles. So you're gonna have a beginning article, it's your scent assignment, 2 on-track articles that the dog has to find and indicate, and you need to pick them up and present them to the judge at the end, and then your end article. So your VST and your TDX have 4 articles, TD has 2, TDU has 3 articles. So the VST, the thing that complicates that variable surface tracking test, when all the other indications are the same as the TDX, meaning that the age of the track, basically the number of turns is very similar, is 1/3 to 2/3 of that track are going to be on non-vegetated surfaces. So if you've got an 800-yard track, you've got hundreds and hundreds of yards that are not going to be with any vegetation at all. And you're going to have turns on that in those areas. And those are some of the hardest things to train the dog, is they can't just pass over that. They are tracking on that asphalt or concrete, or breezeway between buildings. You're going to be under the influence of the way buildings heat up and cool down and move air scent around. So you're in the variable surface test, you have the variation not only of the cover changes and the non-vegetated, but you also have to be working around buildings. It's actually, built into the requirements for the track, must work around buildings, so that the dog is experiencing the way that a large structure can push, pull, and affect track scent during that test. So those are the 4 different tests that the AKC currently has. If you're angling for a tracking championship, you need to pass one of the 2 beginning tests, your TD or TDU, and also the TDX and a VST, and that triumvirate of titles together create your tracking championship. So that's what you would need to do.
Fascinating. How many minutes does it take for a dog to run a long track?
So many things depend on the conditions the dog is running in. We have watched dogs run a TD test in less than 4 minutes. In fact, I've had a couple that just did that. So that's 400 yards in 4 or 5 minutes. That's really fast. And generally the handler's glad they didn't end up getting dragged down and do a face plant while they're trying to chase their dog. 20 to 40 minutes is not unusual. Sometimes dogs struggle, or they'll just be going beautifully along a track, and then for some reason, something's going on at one of the turns in the track, and they struggle, and they search, and they search, and they search, and they may circle, and the handler's just not quite sure what they're seeing. Are they? Because the handler can't influence the way the dog is going. The handler can maybe resist some forward motion. They can stand still and let the dog swing, basically make big circles while they're searching for the track. But otherwise, they just have to wait and watch that dog make a decision. And once that dog has decided, this is where I want to go, the handler may follow. And hopefully they have locked onto a new part of the track. But like I said, there's no real time limit as long as the dog is working. Now, the other half of that is occasionally I've been judging when the poor handler's out there and they're maybe halfway through the track and the poor dog is like, no, I'm not doing this today. This is not my day to do this. And the dog is circling, and then it sits on the owner's feet, and the owner's like, please go, come on, let's go tracking. And the dog go out a couple of feet. No, come back, sit on the owner's feet. And eventually the poor owner turns around, looks back at the judge with this pleading look on their face, like, oh, please, for the love of, just blow the whistle. Please blow the whistle. I'm so done. But that doesn't happen very often. I mean, usually, as long as that team is still working and they have a chance of finding their way out of the little tracking predicament they happen to be in and finish successfully, the judges are going to let them work. We're not going to stop somebody. Now, if the dog leaves the track and is like going off to the next county to follow a deer, or maybe they've got some other agenda that day, well, then the whistle's going to blow, just because you might end up going into another field and following another track that's next door. So, if it's an obvious error and, the dog is not tracking that day, then that would end the track with a whistle blowing. But if the dogs are working and really trying to figure out the track, no, we're not gonna blow the whistle. So the time can be anywhere from 4 minutes to 40 minutes on average. I would say 17 to 25 minutes is what I remember writing on more of my judges' forms than anything. The dog's working on beautifully, works some problems out, finds their way to the glove, gets their title. Yeah.
Let's see. That's all the questions that we have so far. Yeah, so far.
One thing I could talk a little bit about, because we've been talking about scenting and scent work and the work of actually following a track, but then I did mention those little articles.
Right. I was going to ask you about those. Talk about
yeah.
We're great minds.
Yep. In AKC, so sort of like what you're looking for when your dog is doing scent work and they give you that tell, they found odor, so we're doing scent work or nose work. You're looking for that tell. Your dog is like, this is where it is, Mom. It's right here. Some people have a trained indication. Some people don't. In tracking, we try to train a trained indication for the dog as to where the article is, because in a deep field with a lot of grass, if that dog just kind of says, yeah, it's here, and then keeps on going, there's a chance that the handler won't see that article down there and may walk right over it. And if you don't have all four, in the more advanced test, if you have all 4 articles with you at the end, you would fail that track. So you want to make sure that you have a belt with big pockets in, and as you go through, you pick up these articles and you bring them and you present them to the judges at the end. But even in the TD track or the TDU track that only has the one end article or one extra article on the track, we like to have the dog indicate the article. And actually in the requirements in AKC and the rules, it says the dog must clearly indicate the article. Now, as a judge, I can tell you that if the dog is going along, just all of a sudden bobs their head down, looks up and keeps on going, we saw the dog indicate the article. We know where it is. The handler probably noticed that too, and will look at that area, reach down, get the article, hold it up, say, I've got it, put it in their bag and continue on. In Canada, as far as I know, you have to tell the judges what the dog is going to do when they come upon an article. And if they do not do that, you fail. So I'm glad AKC doesn't do that. It just does not clearly indicate. But to me, the dog stops, the dog wags its tail, the dog jumps up and down, the dog sits, the dog lays down, the dog does anything. We love that. I train a down on the articles. And you may or may not get that on a cold, wet day with a Weimaraner because they don't want to get their tummies in the icy water. But for the most part, a down in the summertime is a great thing to train in the grass. What you don't want to do is try to train a indication for an article that the dog doesn't like to do. So if your dog does not like to lay down, you don't want to pair a behavior that they don't particularly like to do with the finding of an article, because they'll start to avoid articles because they don't want to do that. So you're sensitive to that. Be sensitive to that. With my dogs, the down wasn't a big deal, and so I literally in the kitchen or in the yard someplace and not associated with the track at all. I clicker trained and clicker shaped a down upon finding one of these big leather gloves, and eventually generalized that to anything they found on the track that smelled like the track layer. But you have to start somewhere with one thing and then generalize it from there. So in the workshops that I do, I just do a little demonstrating on sort of doing a little shaping, training it down. Hopefully it can make the dog think it's their idea, that when they lay down on the article, mom suddenly just gives them lots of goodies. So I kind of like to do that. But what you'll find is you can start with one thing as far as training, that article indication, as they call it, and then kind of see what your dog offers you. And then as long as you can get that fairly consistently and reward it richly, you're going to have a wonderful indication that the article, whatever it is the dog really likes to do, because eventually those articles, what happens as we train is we begin to reduce the amount of food that they're finding on the track that rewards tracking behavior. And we begin to add a lot more of our rewards to the articles. So value begins to shift a little bit. And so when they find an article, man, they're excited, and they're going to give you that behavior that they know is going to get you up there and get them that goodie right away. Because I've been working for the last 250 yards and 3 turns, and here's the article. I want you to come up here and feed me. So that's kind of how that works. At first, we're just rewarding tracking behavior. We're rewarding attention to the footsteps and staying very close to the footsteps, and rewarding the effort of tracking itself. And we train the article indications separately, and then we combine the two together as they're actually beginning to track. And then that works. It tends to work out really nicely for the tracking dogs.
So just out of curiosity, my boy dog lies down. He taught himself that, and my girl dog picks up the glove and tosses it around a little bit. Yay, look what I got. Where are my cookies? Just out of curiosity, what are some of the more amusing tells or indications that you've seen?
We've had dogs that will stop and bark over an article, which is kind of fun. Some dogs will retrieve the articles, and it's always fun to see. I tend to think on the more advanced tests, it might be better if they didn't move the article off the track, but sometimes they're really good at just going right back and getting started again. I have seen dogs that will nose target repeatedly when they find an article, kind of like, being at the bottom of the A-frame, and they're touching their target when they're learning their contact behaviors. So those are all kinds of fun things. But quite often what we have is, no matter what the dog has been trained to do, they'll stop. They'll be tracking along beautifully and then just stop and lift their head, and not unlike nose work, turn around and look back at mom. Mom, it's here. And they wait for their handler to come up and pick up that article. And well, on a test, you can't carry any food or reward them then, but you could say, good job. And you can offer them a drink of water, which is huge, because often they get thirsty with all that tracking. Put the article in your bag and ask them, can you find another one? And let that dog get going and finish their track that way. So I like the idea that your dogs have sort of chosen their own
definitely. And,
right.
I had nothing to do with it from the get-go. He would lie down, and I'm glad she's throwing it around, and he'd scamper in.
I love it. That's wonderful. That would be really fun to see. It's fun to see a dog that excited about finding their articles.
She's very excited about finding it. Okay, yeah. We have another question here. If I pick up the article when my dog finds it and wave it in the air so the judges can see my dog found it, will my dog and I fail if I should have the misfortune to drop the article somewhere on the track?
Oh, that's such a hard question. Technically, by the rules, yes, you would fail. It would break our hearts as judges to have to do that. It really would. Yeah. So
you have really deep pockets.
Yeah, exactly. We always have like a little show and tell during one of our seminars to pick up and show all these things. The bag that like when you're doing scent work, a lot of people like a has like a mesh top and the really deep pockets. Those are great. They were great in tracking as well, because those pockets are deep. And the thing is that we bend over again and again, sometimes in tracking. Maybe our dog gets tangled and we need to bend over and untangle them if we've gotten maybe the tracking lines wrapped around a foot or something. And that's when you could likely drop an article. Those deep pockets, you're not going to drop anything. And for those that are familiar with it, if you do field work, they call it half vest. It's basically a field belt. So if you don't want to wear the vest, there's a belted thing that actually has these long, deep pockets that hang down. And they're also either that netting or a little bit of cotton canvas or something. And they tend to have a flap top on them, so that basically the pockets are so deep that once you jam your article down in there, you can practically stand on your head and that's not going to fall out. So it's a really good question. And I actually and honestly have never had that happen at a tracking test where we've had to fail someone for losing an article. You want to keep the start article with you. On a TD, which is the only test actually that just has the two articles, the end article, obviously the start article and the end article. It was never a requirement that you take the start article with you. You could leave it there, though a smart handler wouldn't do that, because if the dog is partway through the track and begins to kind of slow down, or maybe they get distracted, or maybe they run out of juice a little bit, it's surprising how much you can revive that dog by reaching in your pocket, getting out that start article. Hey, buddy, remember? And let them take one whiff of it, like, oh, right. And they get back to work again. So you want to bring that start article with you when you get off the start flag. Make sure you grab that and tuck it in one of those nice deep pockets we were just talking about. So in the TD test, when you make it to the end, if you don't have your start article anymore, that's fine. You have to show them the end article. But for the other tests that have on-track articles, you have to present all of them to the judge. So you won't want to lose those. Yeah, good question.
Okay, anything else? Oh, please discuss certification.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. So kind of like in NACSW, when we need to pass an ORT before we can enter a trial, tracking has done that for years from the very beginning, because there are so few slots available in tracking. I mean, there actually are limits. A huge tracking test would be 12 TDs, and no judge in their right minds wants to have to do that anymore. So often your TD test may be 7 or 8. So there's very few slots for the number of people that want to take a test. And these are tests as opposed to trials, because there are no placements in a tracking test. They are tests, they're pass, fail, and there's no placements for a second, third. So to get into a tracking test, they want to kind of make sure that you've actually done a little bit of work and training, then that you have a reasonable chance of passing, you're prepared. So they go through certification process. And that's recently changed, particularly during COVID, because it was getting pretty tough for people to find a judge eligible to do a certification, which is actually taking a TD test under a single judge. When you're taking an actual AKC test, there are 2 judges that officiate, and both of them have to agree that that handler and that handler team passed the test according to the rules. And that, you know, that there's no question about that. For certification, it's one judge, or now in this case, someone who has put a TDX on a dog anytime in the last 10 years. They need to brush up on the rules, and they actually have to provide that credentials on the certification forms that they give you. What it is you're basically running a full TD test under all of the rules, the age, the length, the number of turns, everything the same, followed by that judge and or the person who's put a TDX on a dog in the last 10 years. And if you can finish that track completely unassisted, I mean, basically the judge stays in the car, you go out there, pick up the starter, run that whole track by yourself and bring them back the glove, you would pass your certification. I just want to make sure that you're really ready to enter a test. What the certification then means is you'll have a page, and there are 4 sections on that page, each with a full certification form. And each one of those is good to enter one tracking test. And they actually have to be originally signed and dated by the judge. They're good for 2 years after the date of the certification. And when you enter a TD or TDU test, you cut one of those slips out and you tuck it in and you send it in with your entry. That's required for your entry. So all TD tests require a certification, a signed original certification form that's within the 2-year date to accompany your entry with your fee and your entry form. So you can send all 4 of those. If you don't get into a test, because sometimes there are 13 entries for 6 tracks and a good number of you won't get in, the tracking test secretary will send your certification back to you so that you can reuse it. The only time you lose that certification form, so to speak, is if you go to a test and you're unsuccessful. Then that certification form is finished, but you have 3 more that you can use to try to get into other tests. Should you have a hard year and you try 4 times and you're unsuccessful, then you will need to recertify again in order to get more certification forms. They just got to make sure that, well, if you failed 4 times, maybe you need to take a couple lessons, see what's going on, brush up a little bit, test again, and then get another set of certification forms and try entering again. So that's all it is. It's just to make sure, like with the ORT, your dog has done some training here, you've done some training, you're ready for the test, and you're taking a slot that belongs to you because you deserve to be there. You're trained up and ready to go. And that's really all it is. It's just that you've done the training and you're ready to go. So,
you have any data on the pass rate for certifications and the pass rate for the various tests?
yes, actually, I do. The certifications, and I've done many of them now, I would say about 70% of the people that come to me for certifications pass. And if they don't pass, we immediately turning into a lesson. And we discuss things, and we try to set a time. We can't recertify again the same day. They have to go back and then that's by the rules. We go back, do a little bit of training. Often it's because their dog wasn't used to having me following them. It's a lot of dogs, if they've trained alone, they don't like having somebody out following them, and we're not even very close. I mean, the judges normally in a test stay 30 to 50 yards behind. Often they haven't even made the next corner, and so they're still back here, that the team has gone up, made the next corner, and they're going this way, but then they look back and they see wherever it is, it's relationship wise, where they're still 30 to 50 yards away or more. So occasionally it's just that the dog's not ready for that. So I always remind people, please, just before you're going to certify, have that friend or 2 follow you around out in the field, just to make sure that your dog is reasonably comfortable with that. But I would say about 70% of the dogs that come to me to try to certify pass, and usually they do fine on the next one. It's just some little thing happened, or some little problem that they had. As far as the American Kennel Club TD test, on average, it's a 50% pass rate. Recently, in the tests that we've had here in Rochester, we've had 6 or 7 out of 8 pass, but some years everybody seems to arrive ready to go, and the conditions are beautiful.
Right.
You can have a year when it's been hot and dry, and the hay is just crispy and the ground is half bare, and I'll tell you what, your pass rate is not going to be good, and it's because the conditions are so poor. So the TD tends to be, I would say, between a 50 to 65, 70% pass rate, not unlike the certifications, honestly. Once you jump from there to TDX and VST, the pass rate plummets, just because the difficulty of the test, and I think because a lot of people, I believe, underestimate the amount of training and effort that you need to pass those tests. You don't pass a TD and you say, okay, now I'm ready to enter a TDX test. So in TDX test, I could say the failure rate's about 86%. So maybe 80-20. So about 16 to 20% of the dogs that try TDX tests pass. Clubs can offer TDX tests for years and never have a passing team.
Ow.
Yeah, they're tough. And some tests and test areas and terrains are more difficult.
Yes.
And again, year to year, the weather, the dryness, conditions. So that's kind of tough. The VST is even harder. So recently, I think the pass rate in the variable surface test was up to about 12%, 12 to 15%. But again, I think there's another one that people just really underestimate the difficulty in training, the dedication it takes to train a dog. And there's another case where you really have to train in busy places, maybe medical office building parks, professional parks, college campuses. places where hundreds and hundreds of people may have walked all over your track for 3.5 or 4 hours, and your dog still has to find only the trail of one of those people throughout all of that, on all that hard surface, among all those buildings and all that stuff. So it takes a lot of dedication to train a dog up through that, but it can be done. I'm living proof of that. And so are many. People are getting better. The pass rates for that test are going up just because the quality of the training is going up. And so the dogs are arriving more prepared. The TDU, I think, is on course with the TD for pass rate. It's a little tougher again. I think probably your TDU is between 45 and 55% pass rate, as opposed to 50 to 65% for the TD. So I don't mean to let those numbers scare you. I think that the other thing is there's an awful lot of nerves involved. Sometimes I remember when I was trying to get into VST tests, there were so few of them, and so many people pile up at the top and are looking to get into these tests, that I was looking every state east of the Mississippi for 2.5 years to get into a test. And that meant I was driving 13 hours out towards Chicago. And believe me, you got hotel stays, you got blah, 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 blah. By the time you step up to the start flag, you're like, you have so much invested in this. It's hard to remain calm and together. So I think the handler's nerves get into that too. When you get into the higher level tests, you've been trying for years to get into one. Finally, you get into one. It's a 13-hour drive and you're at a hotel and you're blah, blah, blah. You've got a lot riding on that start flag. And quite often that's where the fail happens. The dog is under so much pressure to get to that start flag and tell the handler which direction this invisible track goes, that it just crumples right there. And as soon as, for whatever reason, if they fail and the judge says the track goes this way, your track layer will help you finish. That dog hits that line and finishes the track in 20 minutes because everybody's relaxed.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there a certification for TDU, or is the TD certification acceptable for TDU?
Yes, the TD certification is fine for TDU. What I try to ask someone when they contact me, or if wherever and it's odd because there are like 2 tracking judges right now in the state of New York. So yeah. There you go.
Yeah, there's a problem with that.
Yeah. So that's why it's nice that now they've opened it up to someone who has a TDX that's willing to do that, to read up on the rules, to lay the track and do the forms. So that helps a lot. But where were we going with this story?
Certification.
Certificate, yes. Yeah. So when someone calls me with that, I ask them, well, what have you been training more? Have you been training more for TDU? What will your dog be more successful? What are they used to in their training? And we'll try to go with whatever their dog has been experiencing most successfully in training. That's what I encourage them to. Let's set up a track for your dog that's more like what you've just been training. But if you get a certification for a TD test, and then a TDU comes up open and you'd like to try to get in, that certification is good to go on the TDU as well. Even though the requirements are slightly different, you're good to go. You only need one certification for either TD or TDU, and then you can get into either one. Then once you've passed one or the other and have that TD or TDU title, that's your pass to get into any other test that you want. Once you got that title, you are then entitled to enter the TDX, the VST, or TDU, TD, whatever the opposite one is of the 2 beginning tests.
Fascinating. Let's see, a couple of people. Okay. Let me just think here. All right. Types of items for articles for VST and TDX.
Good. Another good question. Now, that's another really excellent question. The nature of the articles changes a little bit between those tests. So in all of the non-urban tests, and actually in the TDU too, that all of them except VST, all tests except VST, your articles will be either cloth or leather. And that could be a knit mitten, a sock, a ball cap, a big heavy suede leather glove, a wallet, a little like a leather eyeglass case. Those are all kinds of articles that you could find on your TD or TD, actually with your TD, you're only going to find basically a sock and a glove. A bandana would work. On the TDX, that's where you're going to begin to find some different articles for sure. Bandanas, socks, wallets, leather eyeglass cases, pieces of leather belts, the visors off of someone's hat, knit mitten, basically what they call any personal items made of cloth or leather, you could find on your TD or TDX test. I have heard horror stories about the poor track layer that goes out and somehow forgets one of her articles and has to sneak under her sweatshirt and pull off her under things, her bra, and leave it as an article. And the poor person who runs that track is a little bit shocked and horrified to find that, but they pick it up and they put it in their bag because it's there. And sure enough, they passed because the article, for whatever reason that the track layer should have had, wasn't there and didn't have it. So strange things do happen, but generally not. Now, the VST is this whole other ball of wax, because in the VST, you have articles that are plastic and metal as well. So a little less scent absorbent, and the kinds of things you might find in terms of, cloth and leather would be pretty much the same kinds of things you'd find in the other tests. But then in the VST, the variable surface, you're going to have like electric switch plates, like that you'd find as switches for your lights. The discs of metal that would actually go into a construction site would be over a junction box. Mm-hmm. They could be strange little pieces of iron, but they have to be about 3 inches by 5 inches, not much bigger, not much smaller. Like crushed tin cans, anything like that that could blow away or hurt a dog to pick them up, those aren't really allowed. I mean, the judges will just say, no, you can't use those. The judges have to approve the articles used in a test by the track layers. Plastic, again, it could be a plastic switch plate. Mm-hmm. It could be the top of a yogurt container. Metal, it could be like one of those little Altoids mint boxes laid out flat. Oh my gosh. Again, a leather notebook of some kind. A little leather notebook could be used as a leather article. So the kinds of things that you find in a VST often look a little bit like trash, because the top.
Just thinking that.
Yep. They can look like some errant piece of junk that's out in the parking lot. And sometimes there are other errant pieces of junk out in the parking lot. You've got to depend on your dog. Not that you can't pick up a whole bunch of things, but your dog's not going to indicate or shouldn't indicate things that don't have the track layer scent on them. So if there's a bunch of junk all in a row and your dog slams into a down with one of those little pieces of junk under its own, you can be pretty sure that was the one the track layer set down. The rest of that stuff, you can leave it. But that thing you want to make sure you put in your pocket and take along with you. So you begin to generalize articles fairly early on, but certainly by the time you're looking at training for VST, you're starting to save the weirdest things to turn into articles. And also because you're aging track so much, I don't know how many articles I had get mowed over by lawnmowers, because I would lay a track in the morning and everything looks fine, and then you just don't know that they had the lawn service coming that day. And when you come back, what was your articles in 10,000 little bits blowing around as fuzz out there on the track. And it's interesting to see what dogs do when they come across that, honestly. So just I keep going to garage sales and church sales and things like that, and picking up little leather baby shoes and anything that I think, that would about make it for the rules for an article. So hardware stores to get little electrical things that are either plastic or metal. And then little church sales for like little wallets, baby shoes, baby bibs, any little hats, things like that are all things you could use to train with for sure. But at an actual test, the judges actually have to see and okay the articles, and it's actually written down on their judges forms what the article is as far as and where it's located on the track, so that they know if anything's been messed with or missing or something like that for that team. So.
See what else there is. Okay, who lays the certification track? The judge or the TDXer?
Okay,
the TDer.
The track that you would test on for your certification is laid by someone else while you're not there and not watching. It is a blind track. So So I have had a track layer lay tracks. For instance, this weekend, I have 3 tracking certification tests on Sunday. I'm going to plot those tracks on Saturday and actually flag them. And I have someone who's coming to help me relay those tracks on Sunday. And I'm going to give her the maps of these tracks. The flags will be out there. She will walk them again, put down the articles, and pull all the flags except for the start flag and the indicator flag that we need to have on a TD track. So in that case, the day before, I would have walked the track. And the day of the certification, my track layer will walk the track, but usually it's just me. And honestly, when I'm setting up a certification track for someone coming to see me, I walk it twice. I walk it once, I put down the flags, I walk it a second time, I make my notes on my map, I pull all the flags, I leave the articles, and I come back and I let it sit for half an hour. Because honestly, in a test, yes, the track is only walked once on test day, but the day before, you've had 2 judges, the track layer, a flag bearer, and possibly an apprentice judge, all walking the line on that track once. And then the track layer goes back and walks it at least twice more to make sure that their maps are good, that their step counting is good, that they could walk that track in their sleep blindfolded. And so that track has had 6, 7, 8 passes over it day before by all those different people of all those different scents. And yes, indeed, on test day, your track layer goes out and walks that track once at the assigned time, laying the articles and pulling all the flags that need to be pulled so there's nothing left. And then you go to the start flag and you run that track with that single walk. But I'm telling you that 24-hour-old scent is still there, and all of it is still there. And the amount of trampling of the grass and such makes a big difference. So I generally will walk my certification tracks twice. And it doesn't make it harder. It doesn't make it easier. I think it makes it more test-like, honestly. So
Let's see, a few more things that popped up. What happens if the designated article is actually missing, as in somebody took it?
it happens. It happens, and I've seen it happen. I've had it happen to me, and I've had it happen on one test that I can remember.
Nice.
If the article is missing, and let's say if it's an on-track article, so maybe it's one of the more advanced tests, and it's supposed to be along the track someplace, and you would pick it up and go on and finish the track. You, of course, as the person who's being tested, you would not know necessarily that there was supposed to be an article there, but the judges know. The judges know exactly where it should have been, and they wait and they watch, and they see that nothing is happening. They don't see any indication, or they see the dog maybe breaking off and doing a little searching, and I think that's where that article should be. But then the team continues. The judges will walk up to that spot and look around, at least right in the vicinity of the track. And if that article is not there, that team gets credit for it because they did look briefly for it and it wasn't there. And you're just given credit because it happens. Animals and people both, particularly that variable surface tracking test on an urban college campus, you don't leave anything anywhere without somebody picking up and whipping it into a garbage can. I'll tell you that. They just think it's trash. So quite often articles disappear on urban tracks in particular, not as often in the fields, but they could. It's amazing what a fox will take away given the chance. So that's a really good question. The judges kind of triangulate, they know right where that article should be. So they watch the oncoming team as they are arriving at that spot. They watch carefully for any indication that they are finding the article or that they're showing indication that it was there. If they can see that's just not happening, they continue following the team, and when because they're well behind, when they finally get up to the point where the article should have been, they make a brief lookabout and then they go on. They don't want to spend too much time looking, because if 10 feet away they do find the article, that team has failed, because the dog supposedly should have gone off the track far enough to find that article and pass. At that point, the article should be recovered. So I had a couple personal experiences with that. Once when I was learning how to judge VST and did just that. I went off to look for the article, and one of those judges who was in charge grabbed me and turned me right around and said, "You want to fail this team?" I said, "No." She said, "Well, you go ahead and keep on looking. You go ahead. Another 10 feet over there, you find that article, you're going to fail this team. Let's just keep going." They looked for it. It wasn't here. That's it. Case closed. So we went on.
So that's interesting, because if I don't know, somebody comes along and picks up a glove and it's 10 feet off the track, and it's been carried by somebody else, is the team that's in the test still supposed to find that?
Technically, if it's within 10 or 14 feet of the track, yeah, and there isn't even a number of feet that's even in the rules. But if the article is easily found by the judges nearby the track, you would fail. I failed.
We're blinders.
Yeah, I failed the first VST I ran with my young dog when he searched and searched in the area and went on, and we were all around the next turn, and it just stopped and actually indicated another article when I heard the whistle blow. And I said, holy cow, what's going on? But I did notice the gallery, the group of people weren't following us anymore. So I picked up the article and went back around the corner, back around the edge of the building. And there were the judges in this huge group of people. And they said, you missed an article. And I said, where was it? And it was at the base of a light post in a walkway where there was a church, and hundreds of people have been walking back and forth there into a service, which I don't think they knew that was going on, because that you wouldn't put an article there where hundreds of people would walk over, but they did. And somebody had picked it up and winged it all the way almost to the entrance of the building. It was against the building. It was good 20 feet away. And my dog had looked and indicated kind of like there could be something here, but even then there were still people coming and going. I was trying not to get them tangled in my line and keep on going. And so I just kind of went on, maybe pushed him a little bit because, I didn't know. But somebody in the gallery went over and started looking, and they found it. And it was like 25 feet away against the side of a building. It had been moved from the base of the lamppost. And the judges did, it's in the rules. And I was, and they apologized, but that was it. And I don't think the people in the gallery knew that that's what would happen. I mean, basically tend to be friendly, but that stuck with me, because then I remembered my experience when I was training under some VST judges. You want to fail that dog? You go ahead and look for that article. No. So that's a good question. Your TDU articles, if they're missing, you're going to be given credit. If your dog looks like they're interested, but they just can't find anything, so they go on, the judge is going to get to that spot. And if within a reasonable few minutes, looking right around in the exact area which should be, if that article is not there, you're given credit for it and you pass the test. That's okay.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Whose scent is the scent article, the judge or the track layer?
Very good question. That would all be the track layer, because that's what we're teaching our dogs, is to take their scent assignment from that start article. So when we have a tracking test coming up, while the judges design the tracks and they walk it with the track layer, after the judges are finished plotting and flagging that track, they're off it and they don't go back on it. It's only the track layer after that that's allowed to walk that track. And they learn it that way. They walk it a second time. They make their own maps, their own notes. Just before we do that, we make sure that the track layer has the needed articles for that track, whether it's 1, 2 articles or more, and that they literally probably have stuffed them right down their shirt, the start article as well as the glove, particularly if it's a brand new glove that the club is providing. They might have some embroidery, some decoration on about their test or about their club. That track layer is told, take these articles home with you, stick them down your shirt, have them on your person for the rest of today during plotting day, take them home tonight, and then put them in your boots that you're going to wear tomorrow for the test.
Yeah.
That way you're not going to forget them, because you're going to have to put your boots on, and they will absorb that smell, and then put them on your person. And then when you arrive at the start flag, you pull that start article out, whether it's a bandana, a sock, or whatever it is. You lay that at the start flag and you continue walking the rest of your track. And when you're finished, you lay that glove down and you leave the tracking field. And it's that start article have the scent of the track layer on it, not the judges. The judges are on there the first day just to help with the plotting. But after that, they're not back on that track until they're following you. And it'd be the track layer who was out there actually laying the track that morning. Does that answer the question?
Sure does. I have a couple of questions from people who were not able to tune in.
Okay.
They gave me questions.
Good.
One of which is, actually, there were 2 people who asked me about this. Their dogs tend to overshoot corners. So how would you correct that in training?
That's, it's a question that happens to everybody in tracking. I do try to work a dog more slowly and carefully. And if a dog is moving along too fast on a track, I actually try to help slow them down by either one, putting more food and articles down to make them a little more careful. And I will put quite a bit of tension on that tracking line. So I might look a little bit more like a water skier. My shoulders are back, my hips are back. And we're talking about the big, heavy, fast moving, strong dog. And if they're overpowering me and making me go faster than I want, I try to get a rhythm in my mind, a 1, 2, 1, so that I'm not being forced to walk any faster than that. That in itself, the dog just can't go as fast beyond a corner. What happens is, as the dogs are working longer and longer tracks, they begin to do what we call line tracking. When I have them on a serpentine, a curving track, like we were talking about before, there's none of that because they can't pick up their nose for a minute, because the minute they lift up their head, the track is curving. If they go straight, it's like, they lose the track. So you don't have that going on. As soon as you open it up and they're working long, straight lines, they begin to check in with the track, lift their head and trot. Check in with the track, lift their head and trot. Inevitably, they check in with the track about 2 feet before a corner. They pick up their head and they continue trotting. That corner is well behind them. When next time they check in, they also have to have that crank through their brain. Oh, wait, there is no track scent here. I've lost it. And then they have to commence searching. And that's where those long overshoots at corners happen. And generally it's because the dog has gone to line tracking and is only actually using scent occasionally rather than all the time. That's why I train on so many curving tracks, because it forces, it encourages, it requires the dog to scent continually, and it builds up intensity, accuracy, and endurance. And you can't run on those tracks. You have to work them slowly. So you build up those skills so that when you open it up and you begin to work longer and longer tracks, between the endurance that they've built on that to keep with the track and not do quite so much of trot, scent, trot, scent, and slow that whole process down so that the dog isn't just steaming down the line of the track so fast that they tend to, before they even know it, they're well beyond the corner. Those are the things that help keep the dog within. I like to have a dog working that within 3 of my strides, that dog will have told me I'm beyond the corner. I've commenced to doing a search. And that's what I try to train people to do, is watch your dog. When they're tracking along, the moment you see that tracking posture and cadence change, don't do anything, just keep walking. And when that head comes up and they commence to search, the moment that you notice that change and you've counted your strides, maybe 3, might be 4, watch them circle. When you take 3 or 4 strides back, you'll be right on that corner. The dog will be on the corner, you'll be behind them, but the dog will indicate it within 3 or 4 strides of passing that corner almost every single time. So slowing the dog's forward progress down, actually controlling their speed to some degree, and training on tracks that increase their ability to stick with the scenting for long periods of time. And often that's on curving tracks, but you'll never see it at test. But it's a skill builder, and it really helps them to build up that scenting endurance so that they won't be as long a time on a long track with their head in the air and their nose down. When I get all the way to variable surface tracking, I tell people, and I tell myself again and again, the goal here in my training tracks is to increase sniffs per step rather than steps per sniff, because that's the only way to pass a VST test. So
And that's a great phrase. Another question that I was asked came from a couple of people who have very small dogs.
Yeah.
Because when you see the classic tracking videos and photos, they have these big, powerful dogs, and the handler is, there's real tension on the line, and these little tiny dogs, right? If you put any tension on these little tiny dogs, you're going to stop the little tiny dog.
Yeah,
so how much tension actually needs to be on the lead?
Yeah. That's a really, really, really good question, because that's something that judges actually have to look for. in a tracking test and in the rules, obviously the dog has to be leading the way, and the handler can't be trying to push the dog down the track. So we do look for some tension on the line. And obviously with a bigger, stronger dog, you're going to see a lot of it. So what we have to do as judges, we have to watch a little more carefully when we see a line that loops down to the ground or that may be dragging. There's nothing that says that can't be. That just the weight of the line itself for that small dog is something that they're having to pull against. And in doing so, and putting the energy into moving that line forward, they have taken the lead and they are doing their job. What we can't abide by is a line that's slack, truly slack, and the handler moving forward on that line so that the dog is no longer leading. And if that line were not soft and actually made of wood, the handler would be pushing the dog down the track. So a little dog on a very light line, and it can be a very light line. I mean, it could be, parachute cord, something tiny. As long as that dog is just enough that that handler could feel the tension in their finger and just have it so that the line isn't all the way down on the ground and completely slack, that's all that we need to see. We just can't see a person walking up behind a dog on a slack line, maybe trying to encourage them to go down the track. That is not allowed. They would call that guiding. But it would basically be like, you kind of want that dog to move forward. So we just use your spatial pressure to kind of push them down. So basically one of the things that we look for then is just a gentle tension in the line that knows you're following the dog because they have taken the lead. So that's a really good question, because the smaller dogs are facing a lot more, difficulty just in terms of bushy areas and tall plants and things like that. So I think a lot of our smaller breed dogs are doing quite well with the urban tracking, because you can be guaranteed pretty much it's going to be on mowed grass. It's not some, foot tall, heavy grass. It's trying to plow their way through. The opposite of that is fun and amusing. On occasion, you've got a mature hay field. It's knee high. And you know what nice damp hay looks like after 7 people walk it in a straight line for each. It's trench, right? And so you drop the little dog in at one end and you meet him at the other end because they can't get out of it. So, all kidding aside, it can go both ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, little dog people go for it because my gosh, they can do great. In fact, sometimes someone was working with a beautiful little terrier. I think that was Astrid Pollock with her terrier. There were places where the grass was quite high and it actually had kind of arced over and flopped over. The track was going, and her little terrier was going underneath it, and her line was going underneath it. But boy, that dog was just going like on a little house of fire. And it was just awesome to watch them work that track. And the dog was under the grass as much as it was over the grass, just because of the way that the tall vegetation had flopped over where the track was. So it was fun, and they did great. They did a wonderful job.
I think we've had another couple of questions pop up. We did that. Okay. If someone picks up an article, it now has the other person's scent. Yes.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't know if it's the scent layer or the judge or somebody who actually picks that. Somebody who sees something on the trail or the track and says, "Oh, that's trash. Let's pick it up."
Yeah, that can be a problem. And they sometimes they pick it up and they drop it again on the track, but usually there's still enough latent scent, because that thing has been with the track layer for a long time. It's pretty dense with the track layer scent, even if somebody else touches it. Usually the dog will still indicate it. And anything the dog shows interest in, if you're in an area where there's like several little things lying around, and any one of them could be an article. If your dog is interested in that area, I would just pick everything up and put it in your bag, and then let the judges sort it out at the end.
Just any trash you find, pick it up.
The judges sort it. But I will say, that's a really good question. Occasionally I've seen handlers start their track and they pick up that start article and they continue to hold it in their own hand.
Oh yeah.
While trying to hold their tracking line in the other. And I'm thinking, all that time, they're sweaty hand, they're a little nervous. They've got that sock, they're grasping it like crazy, and they're holding it the whole time. I'm thinking, you know, if even though your pockets are going to smell like you and everything like that, but just taking that start article and putting it aside in a pocket rather than holding it in your hand, it will preserve this track layer scent a little bit better, so that should you need it to reinform your dog about what you're doing or to get them back on track, so to speak, then you can pull that article out of your pocket, let your dog give it a good whiff and think, oh, right, that's what we were doing, and put it away until the end of the track. So that's one thing I would say. So that question just got me to think about it, is just the way that the actual tracking handler at a test handles that scent article that is scented by the track layer, would be to handle as little as possible. You don't really need to go to the extreme, but I have seen handlers come up to that start article with a plastic bag in their hand. They pick the start article into the plastic bag and then into a pocket.
Yeah.
And if they need it again, then it has picked up almost none of their scent on it, and they can use it to rescent the dog for the target odor, essentially the target scent that dog should find to continue to follow on their track. So it's a good question. Good question.
Do you have any tips for helping dogs be less frantic about searching for the track when they do miss a corner?
That's a good one. Yeah, dogs can become what we call hectic or frantic at corner searches. Arousal level. Oh my gosh, we've just been talking a lot about arousal level in dogs and tracking in all sports. Confidence helps those dogs settle a little bit. And again, I would work tracks with oddly more food on them for a little while, so that the dog has a hard time being wrong. And the repeated food or fairly high rate of rewards, oddly, I mean, with some dogs, maybe it won't, maybe it makes them more excited, but repeated steady rewards on the track will help to calm a frantic dog down, because it just builds up their confidence. They don't wonder where they're going to get anything, no matter how hard they're working. I would also tend to go back and work more serpentine or curving tracks, or tracks that change direction all the time, so that there isn't a long straight line and then whammo, I hit a corner. Again, and trying to slow them down while they're working. So sometimes what I would lay would be, rather than tracks that go up and make hard 90-degree turns like this, I would lay tracks for these dogs that were more of a softer zigzag. So go like
30 degrees, 30
yeah,
degrees.
90, have them a little more open turns. So that's like Charlie Brown's sweater, like a softer W that keeps on going like this, because they'll be having to work it all the time. And so their focus is going to be so much stronger. And each of these little legs might be only 15 or 20 feet, 30 feet. And we're talking short, 10 yards at the most. And so that it just constantly changes. And you'll need to flag these. And you'll need to put down a fair amount of reinforcement for the dogs on these. When dogs tend, and here's a whole, I'm going to jump the subject here. If dogs start to notice flags, maybe sometimes as you open them up and get them longer, you'll see, whereas when a dog's working a serpentine curving track, they're so busy with their noses down working, their top of their head might hit the flag. They're not looking for flags at all. But all of a sudden, when you open it up and you've got a 50, 100 yard straight line, the dog's working along, maybe they're thinking, where's that flag? Oh, there it is. And maybe they're finding it a little easier than scent working. That's when I'll set up exercises where it's interesting. You make a box shape. So you go up, flag, over, flag, up, flag, over, flag. Now think about when you're coming up from this way, you're going to see a row of flags up here, but the track meanwhile is going up like this each time.
Yeah.
So, and over here, you'll see a row of flags, but those are corners because the track keeps going back and forth this way. So put more corners and more flags, the flags really become meaningless, because unless you know how to connect the dots, they are meaningless. Mm-hmm. So you can do things like that. And I think that when I see dogs becoming really frantic, one, they've had their confidence shaken somewhat. So I go back to more rewards on the track. And oddly, I make the tracks more difficult. I'm more turns more frequently and a high rate of reward, and then begin to open it up a little bit and also try to slow them down a little bit. Don't track them when they're starving. Feed them first. Just try to bring that emotional level for the dog down. Tracking requires tremendous amounts of concentration, not a lot of physical energy. Well, at some points they do, but I mean, the actual focus for tracking is very cerebral for most of our dogs. And it's interesting, you watch a dog work a track and it doesn't look like they've done anything all that exhausting, and they'll be wiped out for the rest of the day. Yeah. And it's because it's such mental work for them. So I find those kinds of problems tough to deal with, but I have found that things like what I was just talking about have helped a lot of those dogs. It might not help this one particular dog, but it's a good way to start anyway and see if that works for you. I don't profess to have all the answers, but in just thinking about the way dogs think, the way they react, how their arousal level is affected by the work that they're doing, these are all things that contribute to that kind of frantic or hectic behavior when they've lost at a corner, where they've lost the track scent. Yeah, initiating good, healthy responses to searching is where we'd be at with our training with that.
That's an excellent point. Okay. Let's see. Do the test tracks do 90-degree turns, or is it usually a curve?
That's another really good question. On your test tracks, generally you won't have curving lines. I have had curving lines on a VST once because it followed a sidewalk that went around the curve, and it weirded me out entirely, but my dog was tracking like anything. I just follow him around this curve. No, mostly your lines on your tests are going to be straight lines. And interestingly, about the turns on your TD and TDU, where you got 3 to 5 turns, at least 3. I mean, if it's 3 turns only, all of them have to be 90 degrees. You have to one 90-degree right, one 90-degree left, and another 90-degree turn of either direction. Mm-hmm. After that, they can be open turns. None of them can be tighter than 90, so you can't have a track that turns back on itself. But anything from 90 to a softer, and I'll tell you, some of these really soft turns make you feel like, ooh, my dog didn't really make a turn, they're just wandering off the track. So sometimes those less than 90-degree turns feel odd when you're working them. So you will find at least 2 as required in the rule book, 2 90-degree turns minimally, usually 3. When I'm plotting my own TD tracks as a judge, my rules are 3 to 5. I try to make all of them 4 if I can. There's four turns, and I try to make 3 of those are going to be 90 degrees, and 1 will be something different, maybe a little bit less, or a little bit more open than 90 degrees. So that's a really great question. So no, 99.9% of the tracks you'll ever run will not have a curving line in them. I use them in training, again, just because it builds certain skills and behaviors that I'm interested in, that then are very useful on the straight line tracks. In your test, you're going to have straight lines, and you're going to have a minimum of 2 to 3 90-degree turns, and other turns can be open. Yeah, definitely.
So this has been 1 hour and 45 minutes, and it feels about 15 minutes long. This has been fascinating and wonderful. Does anyone else have any questions, or do you have anything else you want to add to this great topic?
Well, I have to say that I've been really happy with the questions. You guys are awesome. Thank you for asking such good questions, because I can tell you know training, scent work, you're familiar with tracking, and even if you weren't, you thought of really, really good questions. I want to thank you so much for that. That's been wonderful. And if you enjoy scent work and enjoy getting out and walking, I mean, tracking does require a fair amount of exercise and walking and time. It's a wonderful sport. But any of the scent sports with our dogs are fascinating. And I've really just recently, we just recently had our first NACSW trial with my older dog.
Oh.
Well, we passed. It was so exciting. I was scared to death.
NW1? NW1.
Yes, we got our NW1.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was really fun.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of the club for coming. It was very interesting. I've done tracking with my previous dog, and I'm doing it with my current dog, and also scent work, and so it's a wonderful thing. I unfortunately never seem to end up doing it in the summer because I have everything else going on, but we just went back to it last week, and I'd forgotten how much I loved it. So thank you. Yeah, I learned a lot.
Thank you. Good.
We're all very, very appreciative of your time, and
A pleasure.
really an hour and 45 minutes, and it feels like we were chatting just like 20 minutes over a cup of coffee. Thank you so much, and thanks
You're
for everybody who signed on, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure, Nancy. Thanks for the invitation. It was lovely. Thank you.
Have a great night, and thanks again.
Thank you.